Welcome, MR. This is actually a Flow Wise Leadership podcast, and incredible to have you in this podcast as a guest. And MR, you've been a leader for a number of decades in the community here in the US, and you are currently also the founder and the president of Indiaspora, a global diaspora community. Um, Tell us a little bit more about you and your immigrant journey in the US. So, I'd love for the audience to hear your journey.
Thank you, Subbu, and thanks for having me. My journey was very similar to many of those who came in the 70s. Just to give a little historic perspective, 60s is when the civil rights movement started and the Civil Rights Act was signed, which then led to the Immigration Act, which for the first time in 65 actually allowed non-whites to legally immigrate to the US. And that's what opened the initial gates for the Indian community to legally migrate to the United States. So I was part of that early group of people in the 70s who came here to study. And then hopefully we all had the aspirations and objective to settle down here and be a participant in the American dream, right? So we have to really thank Dr. Martin Luther King and leaders like him who had the foresight to fight for civil rights, which then led to Immigration Act, opening up the doors to people of color, right? So we should never forget that. If not, you and I won't be having this podcast here today, right? But I came here like a typical student in those days, came here to do my MBA, but then things were quite different than today, right? Contrasting it, when I came, I had to find my brother's friend who lived in New Jersey. My flight was coming into JFK, and somehow he had to spot me in the crowd. And since I only had $8 in my pocket, in those days, that's what the Indian government allowed. Indian government is more liberal today, right? But if you imagine you came with $8, you had to make sure someone met you and took you to their residence and put you up and got you settled. And so that's what happened. My brother's friend fortunately found me, took me in, made me feel at home. And then I had to, in those days, go visit my brother, and he was in upstate New York. So the only way to get there those days, believe it or not, was a Greyhound bus. I don't think most of your listeners today would know what a Greyhound bus is. Okay. Uh, Today would just be take a simple flight or drive or whatever, right? So I took the bus and went to my brother's house. And again, contrast. I mean, the reason I went there was also to collect spices and all the food items that one needs to when you go to college that reminded you of home, right? All the powders and all the dolls and everything else. So she packed all that for me neatly in a box, and then I made my way to Ohio, right? But needless to say, on the Greyhound bus to Ohio, someone stole my luggage. Okay. So here I am. I end up on campus with half my luggage missing, including the pots and pans and the spices. Okay. But then that's when America's spirit shows up. My host family heard about this and immediately went to the local Kmart at that time and bought all the pots and pans and tried to buy spices, although they were not quite successful with that, right? But you can see the journey in those days was contrastedly very different than one would come to today, right? So that was my thing. And when I went to campus, there was an international student union. Okay, there weren't that many Indians there. We had Iranians and Nigerians and all kinds of people coming together, and Indians were one group within that overall foreign students, right? Again, very different today. You go into any campus, there'll be thousands of Indian students. You'll feel right at home. All right, yeah. So, and MR, that was my initial foray coming to the US. Yeah.
You had a very different journey, obviously. And, I was actually, thank you for mentioning MLK and others who've actually really fought for this. And several leaders, people like you, came in early. The journey is so different, as you mentioned, for different kinds of people. From a legal immigration standpoint, there is a whole lot of people the late 90s after, and then most recently, who come in for work on H-1B visa. They become a green card holder or a citizen, continue to contribute. And obviously, there's a huge student community. People like you came as students, and student experience is so different. Take us, sort of, the journey right now from what you're hearing in the Indian American community in terms of the people, the journey, especially people who are students coming in. A lot of things people have taken for granted in a way because, the things that you're talking about, the struggle that you're talking about, people are not going through. What are you hearing? What are you hearing from the community in terms of challenges and also some of the comforts they already have?
Yeah. So I think, and when we graduated, we got a practical training visa. You went and got a job, and then when you went and got a job, they applied for your green card, and you got that within 6 to 9 months, and you're done. Right? You're on your way to becoming, in 4.5 years later, a U.S. citizen, and so forth. It was a very, very different path. Today, the path is fraught with risk, both positive and negatively. Right? So today, you can come on an H-1B, and you're working in a company, and suddenly maybe the company doesn't need you anymore. They lay you off. Then people are not aware of the rules that in 90 days you better find another gig or you're gone. And some of these people who have stayed for 3 years or 6 years have settled down in the US. The families are here. They've bought a house. They have a mortgage. They have all kinds of obligations to the US. And suddenly they're in this dilemma, right? So people today, I would say students coming in to the US, it may appear the process is much smoother. The discovery of a college, getting a student loan, getting the visa is much more automated and processed, but the risks are magnified these days, especially with all the anti-immigrant rhetoric and so on and so forth, that, this could be shut at any point in time. So I think a student or an immigrant today needs to really, really assess the risks involved in coming to the US and really be fully aware before they commit to making that journey. Because, yes, the Indians are the highest number of foreign students in the US. Yes, the Indians spend $10 billion a year in the US as students and so forth. Lot of good stuff, but they may never get a work visa or they may be sent home. So that risk should be assessed. Okay. Very different. Uh, One hand, that millions of us here who can help new immigrants, all that stuff is much smoother than when I came and I was one of the few people on campus who were Indian and finding my way to campus was hard and so forth. Today, it's very easy and smooth compared to those days, but the risks are much, much higher.
I, yeah. And thank you for that, MR. And for the audience who don't know your Indiaspora journey, you've actually worn several hats in a number of decades, from an entrepreneurship perspective and also community building. You really literally built, community in LA for the Indian diaspora. What moved you to start Indiaspora with others, and then what continues to inspire you and motivates you to continue to keep going, to serve the community and also serve beyond the community, pretty much, America in general and also globally. So what really kind of drives you every day?
So again, you have to look at your life in the US. Okay. You come as an immigrant. Initially, you tend to kind of gravitate to people like you. And that's why when we started in diaspora, we found there were hundreds of successful diaspora organizations, the Tamil Sangam, the Gujarati Samaj, the Marathi Mando. I mean, these are all groups that coalesce around a language or a state they come from in India, and you're very comfortable. You talk your language, you celebrate your festivals, you eat your own food, and it becomes a nice, cozy environment and ecosystem for you, right? But what that also does is it keeps you away from mainstreaming yourself. Because are you only going to the temple and only going to your religious festivals? Are you partaking in more of the mainstream activities that bring you closer to your neighbors, your colleagues at work who are non Indian, and so forth? So I think that's something for us to, again, take time to specifically look at our own lives as an immigrant and say, okay, what does my life look like today? What percentage of time do I interact with my own ethnic community or my own DNA of Indians? And how much time and effort and investment do I make in truly becoming an American? I think that card is on the table for every one of us to kind of assess and say, what changes do I need to make? Because the one thing we don't want to be known is to just be Indians and we only work with Indians and relate to Indians and don't really, assimilate into general society, right? So I think that's something we need to be very, very aware of as we kind of lead our lives in the US is to make sure that, we're living here, our jobs are here, our paycheck comes from here. We should contribute to the overall community at large than our own ethnic community. So that's a big thing we found when we started in diaspora was a lot of Indians were happy just dealing with their own kinds of people, right? And when you have to go and say, well, you got to mix it up, a lot of people did understand they had to do it. They liked it. But, some people may be comfortable in their own environment, right? And that was one of the challenges we found initially.
Yeah, you hit a really important point, MR. So, for example, I work, my mainstream work is in healthcare in the last 1.5 decades, and leadership and healthcare, and there is a lot of need for all different types of communities, within the U.S. and especially in a space where in healthcare where we as a country we are not the best, but at the same time we spend a lot of money. There's a lot of healthcare issues that can be solved by smart people from the Indian American community, and the solution is actually for everybody. And in order to solve something for everybody, you folks really need to understand, interact with the whole population, understand different language, ethnicities, different types of people. So I think you hit a really important point where it's really important to expand the horizon of understanding the local community much better, interacting with different kinds of people. And glad that you're saying that as a leader. And I think just for the viewers also, check out Indiaspora because it's just not, although it's actually bringing different Indian American communities together, but it's really looking to impact the whole country and just not looking at just the motivations of just the Indian American community. So thank you for pointing that out. So as a follow-up to that, what are a couple of examples of actions people can take to get involved a little bit more and
Yeah.
expand their horizons? I would love to hear your thoughts and some actionable thoughts.
I mean, as everyone knows well by now, Indian Americans are the richest demography in the US, right? Amongst any ethnic community. Highest earning income, lots of millionaires, billionaires, lots of doctors, lawyers, academic. I mean, you look across any profession, you'll find Indian talent there, right? And so I think because of the educated nature of our community and the success driven, mindset, we are leaders in so many places. But with that comes a lot of responsibility. If you're making a lot of money, it means you need to give more back to society and so forth, right? And so in diaspora is particularly focused on the giving aspect. Okay. So should we be giving back? How much should we be giving? Is it easy to write a check, but can we also give time? I mean, check is the easiest part. Writing a check is so easy compared to saying, I'm going to take 4 hours a week and go volunteer at a soup kitchen, or I'm going to be, mentoring kids in the public library, whatever be it. Yeah. I think so. Really taking a look at your time and money put together, that's one. And second, not only looking at our own community, but the greater community you live in, right? The local public library, your own school, the hospital, whatever be it, right? Soup kitchen. Just look beyond yourself. And I think that should be something we need to focus on. And that's why we do that quite a bit. We have a philanthropy summit, we have an annual India Giving Day. There are many, many ways we're trying to get our community to give and give generously, both our time and money. right? And so we should always be aware of that. It's not all about getting and receiving, which is the paycheck and the money and wealth we create, but it's how much of that do we give back?
Excellent. Great point, MR. And I think a lot of people in the community that I am a part of too, right? So there's people who give back to India, people who give back locally here in the US. I think your point is think beyond that. Think beyond just communities. Yes, it's great to give to the community you are part of, but think beyond that to make an impact because we have the capacity to do it because as a community we're generally very successful here. So as of follow up to that, MR, outside of giving aspects from a leadership standpoint in the global community, right, outside of just in the US, you have a event coming up in Dubai, bringing in a lot of different leaders across the globe. Tell us a little bit more about that. We'll also put this in the show notes. And what drove you to bring all these leaders across the globe of Indian diaspora?
I mean, it took a long time. It seems like we're doing that today, but I started in diaspora 13 years ago as a nonprofit. Okay, and a nonprofit's journey is more challenging and tougher than a for-profit. I wish sometimes it's a for-profit entity. I could lay down metrics and goals and hire salespeople, and lo and behold, we'd be much further ahead. But as a nonprofit, you got to bring the whole community with you, right? So we started in the U.S. And in fact, that's the initial start was, can we just get Indian Americans together to be a force for good? So this meant not only where I live in San Francisco, it's not just the tech community, but really doctors, lawyers, academics, artists, regular business folks, students, everybody in the community together because we want to be totally inclusive, right? And every religion, whether you're Hindu or Sikh or Muslim or Christian or Buddhist, we respect all religions, all professions, really to bring that entire community together. That's what we did in the US to begin, right? Started doing that and really making sure that the community in the US was all truly integrated, working together, helping each other, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how we got started. And within that, there were many different elements to it, right? One is how do you get involved in the community? You can get involved in the community through giving, but also the other part is public service. So can we run for elections? Can we be in public service in an administrative capacity? So these are all things we encouraged, right? So as a community, as individuals in this community, we wrote checks to anybody with an Indian name in 2012 and 2014 who ran for office. If your name was Kanna, Krishnamurthy, Kamala, we wrote checks to all of them to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And then lo and behold, in 2017, they all got elected. So we said, not only are we 1% of the population, now we're 1% of Congress. And we had a big gala in DC and so forth. What that did was it created a platform and we were a catalyst to hundreds of people now saying we can run for office. So in the last election cycle, over 300 Indians ran for office across the US. School board, city council, mayor, all kinds of races, okay? And now, you see the results of that across the country. So it was community engagement, it was running for political office, all these elements need, and then supporting other communities. During the BLM crisis, we stood up in support of our brethren, right? There was anti-Semitic issues, anti-Asian issues. We stood up with our brothers and sisters. So these are all things the community needs to do to make sure everybody else knows we're there, right? And that they would cover our back in the future. So we had to undertake all these things first in the US, and then we decided we'll open up chapters in other countries. So we have a chapter now in Canada, in the UK, in Singapore, UAE, Australia, and we also have an office in India, right? Because there are a lot of Indian diaspora that go back and forth.
Go back and forth.
So this effort took a dozen years, right? And the
That's fantastic.
culmination of that really is now to kind of do a Davos for the global Indian. Because our community now, just to give you some facts, Subbu, it's 30 million diaspora. We're the largest diaspora in the world. US is the largest and most successful at 5 million. But we have large communities in the UAE and Australia and Canada and Singapore and UK, right? You bring them all together. These are successful people. So now we want to bring these folks together at our Indiaspora Forum for Good in Abu Dhabi, where we want to discuss new models for the world. Because this community can create new ideas in AI or climate change or healthcare that you're involved with, or other areas like digital public infrastructure and so on and so forth. So, what can this community do to give back to the world and society at large? That's the big, bold goal for the Indiaspora Forum for Good. And we've seen tremendous response. We have shut our registrations down. We're already at our max capacity of 500 global leaders. We are represented in over 25 countries throughout the world. And all of us are getting together next month in Abu Dhabi to really take on the biggest challenges in the world.
That's fantastic. Big impact, lots of problems to solve in the world. And I was actually looking for tickets, to be honest with you. And I'm sure I will, come for the next one. So the question I had, MR, was follow up to that. You mentioned supporting people to run in political office, to make an impact, across all communities. You've been at the White House many both on the Republican side and the Democratic side, working at the bipartisan level, lots of bills that you actually worked. Tell us a little bit of insight around how the energy has been in the last few years, working with the White House, working in events, how's the support has been, and what else we can do differently. Looking at emerging leaders, what else we can do differently? What are the lessons learned? What are the if somebody wants to get involved, get inspired to not only run for political office, but also kind of make an even better impact by coming into what are the things that people should do differently?
Yeah, I think the first thing our community had to do was to get represented, right? And that's why when you had 1% of Congress now being Indian, people in Washington, D.C. said, hey, these guys are a force. We got to work with these folks. They can write checks. I mean, that's very important in D.C. So once we established that, once we had politicians, a lot of people going into every administration, I think that journey has started and will continue. So, with every subsequent administration, the Obama administration to the Trump administration to the Biden administration, and now back to the Trump administration, you'll see increasing number of Indians in the administration, right? Even now in the current administration, you see so many Indians who have been nominated and so on and so forth, right? And are being inducted into the White House. And so I think we've established that role as Indians being, people who want to do public service, who want to give back, and so forth. So that's happened. What we also had to do along the way was to show the impact of the Indian Americans on society. And that's a report we recently did a year ago with Boston Consulting Group, where we set out to look at 40 different metrics of how the Indian community is impacting the US. For example, we're 1.5% of the community now of the US. We pay 6% of the taxes. Okay. We are 75,000 doctors here in the healthcare space. We're 10% of the physician population in the US. We serve 30 million Americans. Same thing with academics. We have 22,000 academics, but they teach 3 to 5 million college students, right? So in every aspect of society, we're making an impact. It's not about generating money or wealth. We're actually helping Americans. Now that that report is out and it's being well received and talked about, I think people are looking at our community a little differently than saying, hey, he's a tech guy or he's a doctor or she's a lawyer, whatever. They look at us differently and say they're Americans. They're helping all of America, not just themselves, right?
Yeah.
So,
That was a fantastic report. We put it on the show notes as well. I know there was also a good humorous view of the report, that came out, last week. So we'll put that out there. That really shed a light on the comprehensive nature. Like you mentioned, MR. For example, I started in tech for the first few years, and no longer in tech, but much more on the business side. But still, as you mentioned, people look, at people as like, oh, he's from tech. she's from tech. It's typically a branding that goes on, but at the same time, the impact, as you mentioned, across the spectrum, which is such a small population, we have a long way to go to kind of continue to keep the momentum, but also serve the entire all kinds of communities, and be a leader, in this space. I'm really looking forward to hear about the success, of the Dubai event that is happening later in February. But for folks in the US, outside of the Indiaspora, so for someone who's actually living in a smaller city, for example, you're in the San Francisco area, I'm in Philadelphia, I'm closer to New York and DC. But for folks who are listening, who are in a smaller city or a suburb, what are a couple of things that you would, when the emerging leaders to encourage to really get involved?
So, a couple of things, follow us on all the social media platforms. Go to our website, indiaspora.org, and subscribe to our newsletter. It's one of the best. You get informing everyone about what is happening in the greater community, right? We also do a lot of online programs. Yesterday, for example, we had 3 young tech entrepreneurs talk about their journeys. They started companies in their 20s and how they were doing. So, we do a lot of online programs around women's issues or young people and many other related areas. So you can participate at no charge in any of those. And then, for the people who want to contribute monetarily to Indiaspora and support it, there's a whole different path of becoming a member and so forth. And that's a very invitation only type process that we go through. But in general, we are supportive of the entire community. But what we'd ask people in a smaller place to do is self organize, you know, have your own little communities where the key thing you have to do is to involve everyone. Don't just get the tech CEOs together, get the doctors and the academics and the lawyers and everybody else who are representative of the community together, right? And do your own things. For example, during COVID, Indiaspora raised in 1 month $15 million for relief in India, but we also raised $1 million for food banks in the US because there was such a big problem in the US as well. So do your own causes, your own charities, your own programs locally. Don't wait for someone, just start up, just do your own thing. And nothing has to be huge, you make an impact one little step at a time. Right?
That's fantastic advice in MR. Follow-up question. I think this is actually a very close to my heart in a way. Indian Americans, leaders in general, are very, hardworking, and we work a lot. We're also known for our hard work in work or business, etc. You are someone who has incredible energy. You're doing a lot of different things. How do you keep yourself balanced? What are a couple of things you do, and what are the things that you encourage, especially emerging leaders, to make sure they don't get burned out? Because we're an ambitious community, and that also comes with a cost in terms of health. So, a couple of thoughts from your side would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because our community really doesn't like to have conversations around mental health or depression. And so it's great that our prior Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, brought this up across the board, right? Not just within our community, but America in general, that mental health, depression, loneliness, these are all issues we all need to face up to. And this is something that we are also having to have more conversations about, people coming out and talking about mental health. And so, in fact, in our Abu Dhabi forum, we have a famous former cricketer and the sister of one of the biggest movie stars in India talk about mental health and what happens, what are the challenges. I mean, these are things we need to talk about because both at our level, but also as parents, we have to really be keeping track of our kids to make sure they're not going down that slippery shoe and that they're seeking help and you don't treat that as a stigma when they come to you and say they're depressed. It's actually give them help and support. And that is something we are also trying to educate. It's great that the Surgeon General has brought that up as an issue, but that really, I think, looking forward at our community is to really be open and supportive of our society, of our community when we go through these issues that are typically, stigmas.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for mentioning that. And we'll put that in the show notes for Dr. Vivek Murthy's work. And he's got some incredible books. And also, recently, he also, apart from the mental health aspect, he was also advocating for some of the social media restrictions, especially for kids, and also the warning against alcohol from a cancer standpoint. That was like some seminal work, and I know you and Dr. Murthy are pretty close, and looking forward to kind of continue that momentum that he has put in place. Especially creating awareness. Like you said, it starts with creating awareness and removing the stigma. So outside of the mental health aspect, how do you, from your perspective, how do you recharge yourself? What are the things that you do for fun that recharges you so that you can serve more, give more to all the communities?
Yeah, I tend to do a lot of walking. So that's my way of taking time off is I try to walk, 5 miles a day. So manage to make it
Excellent.
happen most of the time, but, don't miss it sometimes as well. But just having a habit of walking, that way you're not on your phone, you're not, you're just walking and your mind is in a different zone and so forth. So that's something I do. And then, of course, another good outlet is watching sports. Uh, of course, I watch cricket because all my friends are cricket mad, but uh, I'll let you in on a little secret. My favorite sport is a very obscure sport called Australian rules football.
Yeah, awesome.
It's in between rugby and American football, and I love that sport. So, I get my time off by watching those kinds of games and stuff like that. But, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But main thing is walking.
Yeah, fantastic. MR, your energy and then your really passion to give to a lot of different communities and also your leadership is so inspiring. And thank you for coming on to the podcast. I will put some of those kind of really things that you actually mentioned in our show notes. And have a fantastic event in Dubai. And I look forward to hearing from you again and looking forward to hopefully have you in the podcast in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Subbu. Thank you.